It's Lisa from Been There, Got Out. And today's guest gave a label to something that we knew years ago, but didn't know there was a label for. And it has to do with dealing with fear of the unknown. So before he even officially introduces himself, Dr. Benjamin Garber, can you tell us what kind of role understanding procedure has in reducing uncertainty when it comes to the family court system? Because we know that we meet a lot of people who are absolutely terrified.
Hi, Lisa. Thanks for having me here. Before I introduce myself, you want me to answer a hard question? Okay.
Yes, and then if you pass, then you can introduce yourself.
And if I fail,
We boot you off. No, just kidding.
uh, so I think you're talking about the phrase that I use quite frequently and advocate for strongly. That is advance orientation.
Yeah.
Advance orientation, or AO, not advanced, there's no D on the end of that first word, means providing the consumer of a service with a roadmap to the service before they engage in that service.
Yeah.
Glad to ramble on as I do quite often, but is this when I introduce myself?
Well, so you haven't answered part of the question. So
Oh,
knowing what to expect, how does
yes.
that affect my uncertainty?
So, okay. Let's make this make sense.
Yeah.
It really is common sense. I don't mean to say obvious things to smart people, but when you know what to expect, when the world is made predictable, your anxiety goes down. If you think about your anxiety or maybe yourself like a balloon, and when that balloon gets filled with anxiety, all it takes is a tiny little pinprick to go boom. By adding structure to an experience, and I'm glad to explain structure more generally in a second, but predictability is one way of creating structure by making the world more predictable, by giving people a roadmap. Effectively let the air out of that balloon and people become more flexible. It's much harder to make them pop.
Hmm.
So, in the context of family law, well, let's not even go there yet. Most people, most adults, I think, have had some sort of experience in medical settings. Hope not, but as we age, we get more fragile and break more easily. At least that's my experience.
Hmm.
So you go to the doctor or you go in for a surgery, however benign, and hopefully somebody sits with you for 15, 20 minutes to talk you through what's going to happen. And you think, oh, aren't they being nice? But really, they are engaging in an established protocol that is known to have three immediate effects and lots of trickle down effects from there. The three immediate effects are when you know what to expect in advance of a medical procedure, you are much more likely to be satisfied with the outcome. And the medical procedure is much more likely to be more effective and more efficient. So the three variables, we'll talk about this often if you want to pursue this subject, are satisfaction, effectiveness, and efficiency, time and cost efficiency. There are
Yeah.
trickle down outcomes from that. For example, there's wonderful, powerful, impressive studies in medical settings that show that advance orientation prior to engaging in something as simple as appendectomy is associated with shorter hospital stays, quicker hospital discharges, and less need for pain medication. Those two outcomes are huge because shorter hospital stays means less exposure to hospital-based infections, less expense, less time out of work, less time out of school, less stigma, and less self-consciousness laying there in that transparent pink Johnny having people poking at you all the time, and less pain medication, especially opioids, but not only opioids, means less risk of dependency and addiction, quicker recovery, um, better outcomes overall. This, I know I'm rambling, stop me at any point, but this general observation about the value, the benefits of advanced orientation yielding greater satisfaction, efficiency, and effectiveness is seen in nursing, medicine, dentistry, at least I'd never before read dental research and really had no reason to. I'm not going to recommend it to you as a good time, but it's really impressive statistically that for more than 50 years, that's about half as long as I've been alive, but anyway, for a very long time, dentists have been showing that that terrifying experience of sitting back with your mouth open and sharp instruments poking at your face and the buzzing of that drill, can you hear it right now? Makes the skin, the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. All of those negative anxiety fueled reactions diminish when you've gone through some sort of advanced orientation. For example, there's a wonderful study in which some very creative dentists created a video game for little kids to play about going to the dentist. And they distribute these video games in advance of your first appointment. So I've never seen it actually, but I'm imagining the cartoon character goes into the dental office and is scared, but gets to know the whole process. And by virtue of vicariously going through that experience, those little patients, the kids, are less fearful and more successful in their dental activities.
Wow. I'm thinking of family court, like somebody's got to make a family court video game with CPS and custody evaluators
You're
and
only
lawyers.
touching on the tip of the iceberg there because some of these studies use augmented reality, which is different than virtual reality, but others use virtual reality. I'm not the expert to explain what those are, but these are alternate full sensory experiences to explore, for example, what's it going to be like when I'm admitted to the psychiatric unit? Where will the nurse's station be? What happens in the day room? What do I talk about when I sit with my therapist? And that sort of advanced orientation, guess what it does? Three answers: improves satisfaction, effectiveness, and efficiency.
Yeah, I think
So
so.
my mantra, and maybe you'll get to a point where you let me introduce myself. My mantra has become, why the heck aren't we doing this in family law? It's, well, not only is the process of going to court and contesting custody in and of itself terrifying, the people who go there all are already on edge. Their balloons are already full because their world is being torn apart. And then they hire a lawyer, and the lawyer shuffles them into a courtroom, and the judge sits on a bench and bangs a gavel, and services get ordered. And being a good doobie and not wanting to look like a bad parent and, God forbid, lose your kids, you say, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, and you do what you're told, terrified that the custody evaluator, mediator, parenting coordinator, arbitrator, early neutral evaluator, there's a long list of services that courts order parents who are disputing custody or otherwise engaged in family litigation have to engage in. I'm pausing because at this point, when I talk about this to other professionals in the field, I use a big phrase, and I'd like to say in simpler language, but in my, when they put me on the stand and I use 6-syllable words, I refer at this point to ecological validity. Uh, has nothing to do with the quality of the air and the water out there. Ecological validity to judges and to court evaluators asks the question, how representative of this person's real life behavior is what I'm seeing now?
Mm.
So if your balloon is full, your life's being torn apart, you're being shuffled through the court system, you are on edge, you are wearing your Sunday best, you are yes mamming and yes sirring like you've never before done in your life, that's probably not the real you. So I do custody evaluations on occasion. I'm not a judge. Well, I haven't introduced myself yet, so you
I
don't.
was going to say now is the perfect segue into introducing yourself finally. And
No. I have to finish the thought. Otherwise, I'll lose it. If I conduct an evaluation and everybody is yes mamming, yes sirring, and wearing their Sunday best, I'm not seeing who they really are. If we can let the air out of that balloon and they can be more relaxed, they can go, oh, then maybe I've got a better chance of increasing the ecological validity, the representativeness, or the value of the work that I'm doing. And in that way, better advising the court about the children's needs. And the best way to do that is through advance orientation.
Yeah. As you were saying, as I'm filtering all that, I thought what we like to say is that we want to make you as calm as possible so that you're more credible.
I understand the value in that statement. I don't want to make people as calm as possible. I want people to be themselves.
Okay.
So, frankly, if you're an anxious wreck in life, I got to see that. Then some people are. And
Okay.
if some people are like yoga calm constantly, well, two things are true. One is I want to see that, and the other is I want to know how to do that because I want
Yeah.
some.
Well, when I say as calm as possible, I don't mean yogic calm for everyone, but it's calming themselves down in what they look like in as calm a state as they can be to get
Yeah,
the message across. Because when we're freaking out, we can't communicate effectively.
it's more than that, but you're making an excellent point. True. When that balloon is full, when you're freaking out, when your anxiety bucket is full overflowing, you can't communicate clearly, and your thinking becomes less flexible.
Mhm.
Your ability to decentrate, that means to practice empathy, to see the world through another person's point of view, becomes very limited. And that's important because the worst of the worst cases in court that I see happen when two or more adults are closed to understanding one another's perspectives and are so focused on their own that they can't even see their kids' perspective. And that's just destructive of everybody involved.
And not just at the moment, but moving forward, because it isn't just life doesn't just happen in the courtroom. There's the thereafter, and not just till they're 18, but after that.
Well, that's that trickle down benefit because when you can insert advance orientation, when you can give custody litigants a roadmap before they engage in the process, and then they can engage in the process in a more typical, less full balloon state, then the outcome from the court process is much more likely to be valid and meaningful and useful and benefit their kids. Because when that doesn't happen, the outcomes aren't valid and useful and meaningful. And then they end up becoming revolving door litigants. They go back to court and back to court and back to court endlessly, which I guess moment to moment may feel necessary, but in the long run is just a horribly depleting, destructive experience for all involved.
Yeah. All right. Introduce yourself now, Ben.
Okay, thanks. Lisa. Hi there, I'm Ben Garber. I'm a New Hampshire licensed psychologist. I'm a recovering therapist, which means I spent about 30 years providing direct clinical services to kids and families. But I have found that, well, let me say that differently. I've come out of the closet. I am more and more accepting of the fact that I'm not such an empathic person. I'm a much more analytical, verbal person. So I think I did okay sitting with people and helping them understand and cope with their pain. But I think I do better when I'm in a position to advise courts and advise lawyers and advise litigants how best to understand those processes and understand and serve their kids' needs. So if you want therapy, I'm glad to help you find a good therapist wherever you are. I'm in touch with people all over the world. But if you're looking for somebody who knows child and family development, we might come back and talk about what the heck is family development. But anyway, and someone who knows the dynamics of how families work, particularly when they're under pressure, and someone who can bring that knowledge to bear to help a litigating family get through the litigation and serve their kids' needs, that's what I do.
So you work with families directly, but you also work with judicial professionals, legal professionals.
I primarily work with legal professionals in various capacities. These days, the only direct family interactions I have is by providing custody evaluations, better known these days as parenting plan evaluations.
Hmm. Okay. All right. So in your work, what have you seen, like what are some misconceptions that parents tend to have about the family court process that lead to that unnecessary fear and stress or poor decision making?
Great question. Um, Seems to me we need to write an article about that.
Okay.
Um, Perhaps the biggest misconception is that there is a single ultimate truth.
Hmm.
Um, I would be comforted to think that there is a single ultimate truth in science, like gravity works or magnetism, however that works, happens, because that makes the world predictable. And I know, when I let go of my pen, it's going to fall down on the paper beneath it. That's gravity. Uh, wow, that's a great question. We we human beings are really limited. We're pretty good at understanding linear chains of events, like dominoes falling in a row. A causes B, which causes C, which causes D, and you can imagine, one after another. And that works in some very limited circumstances when psychology and the court come together, like guilt versus innocence in criminal court. There is an ultimate, he did it or he didn't do it, A, B, C kind of thinking.
Hmm.
In relationships, even in the simplest pairwise relationship like you and I, it's seldom or never linear and simple like that. There's a constant, I refer to it as an Escher-like flow. You've seen the artwork of
MC
MC
Escher.
Escher, not to be confused with MC Hammer, I keep being told, but MC Escher drew these incredible pictures where there was no beginning, no end, everything
Hmm.
affected everything else. It's called chaos, but not in the sense of utter randomness, but there's no single cause. Everything is a cause and an effect. Relationships work that way. And so asking a judge or an evaluator or a mediator or an arbitrator or any human being to sort that all out into a simple cause and effect ABC sort of thing and come up with an answer is impossible. We don't think that way.
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time arguing with my colleagues who want to force that square peg into a round hole. I'm glad to talk about that at great length. It doesn't work. So, for example, I'll be controversial here. You're familiar with controversy and being controversial, I trust. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. I was going to say, let's get into that a little bit. The
Okay.
square peg into the round
So,
hole.
well, one of my favorite gripes in this regard, and we can come back to your question about misconceptions in a second, but one of my favorite gripes is that a lot of courts and a lot of mental health professionals, especially psychologists who work in the courts, insist on applying individual adult psychometric tests, like you've probably heard some of these names, like the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, the MMPI.
Hmm.
There's a whole bunch of other tests of that sort, which have their place and are really useful if the question being asked is about the individual's social, emotional, intellectual functioning. I can give you an IQ test, for example, and I can come out with pretty good certainty with some estimates of how your brain works in different kinds of thinking. But my colleagues confuse diagnoses, which are qualitative statements about individual functioning, like major depression, uh, alcoholism, schizophrenia. There's the whole DSM or the ICD, which are books that list diagnoses. My colleagues confuse the tests that yield diagnoses with dynamics, where A diagnosis, I probably should have said this first. I'm sorry if I confused people. A diagnosis is a pattern of thinking, feeling, or behavior that characterizes an individual. A dynamic is a pattern of thinking, feeling, or behaving that characterizes a relationship.
Hmm.
And the two seldom go together. So if the court is asking me to conduct an evaluation, to advise the court about how mother and father and 8-year-old Sally fit together, I don't care if mom is diagnosed bipolar and dad is diagnosed manic depressive, or labels are coming to mind randomly, whatever it is. I care about how they behave in connection with the child, the dynamic, not the diagnosis.
I'm so glad you said that, because often in these difficult cases that we work with, people are ordered to take psych evals and they cost thousands of dollars and they get really worried about it. And we talk about how even if somebody is labeled as something, what's really much more important are the patterns of behavior in that relationship. What's that person's ability to parent like? How does the child interact with that person? It's almost meaningless. And we've also interviewed attorneys who say it's a waste of money in most cases because it doesn't really impact a situation in custody. It's just a label. And also, and you tell me if this is true or not, in America, there's the Individuals with Disabilities Act. So if someone is diagnosed as a narcissist, that doesn't mean that they're going to get their kids taken away because of that condition.
That's an interesting perspective on it. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to comment on
Okay.
the legislative angle there. I like it though. Um, I will tell you that approximately 3 years ago, maybe 2023 or so, I published a pretty high profile article with a colleague of mine, Dr. Robert Simon from California, saying this, that individual adult psychometric instruments have very limited value in the context of family law. And our colleagues, many of whom are close friends and trusted peers, were so incensed and eager to refute it that they submitted a rebuttal article to the same journal, and the journal told them they couldn't have that many authors. They had to kick some authors off the list. There was no room to have that many people arguing with Garber and Simon. So
Wow.
agreeing with you is not a popular position for lots of reasons, some of which are kind of cynical, but I stand by it strongly. Oh, there's lots else that's come to mind as we've spoken, but time is limited. Where should we go from here, Lisa?
Okay, so I agree with you with the psych eval things. I think even though I haven't read the article, but I'd be interested in reading it. So I have a few things I want to talk about too, especially regarding advance orientation. Let's say I'm at the very beginning of the process. I'm thinking we actually spoke with someone this morning, a man in your same state who is absolutely terrified. The word we hear more often than anything with our babies, the people very early in the process. We
Sure.
ask, what's going on with you? And he said, I'm completely overwhelmed. And we said, what are you worried about? And he said, because I don't know what to expect, but I feel like my wife is going to blow this up in the court because she's really, really vindictive. And throughout those next 25 minutes that we talked, we just surface level talked about how the things that he was most afraid of are irrelevant to the actual custody case and the division of assets and all that. And you can see him just coming just by knowing that little bit of information. So
Yep.
I'm moving to the question of before someone files, when they have all this fear, what are some first steps they can take to shift from this reactive, fear-based mindset to a more proactive, informed, and strategic one?
You ask good questions. Let me go
Thank
back and
you.
cover some territory that I think we missed. You said you'd like to see that article, and anyone else who might as
Yeah.
well other articles that may be relevant here. I would direct you humbly, or not so humbly perhaps, to my website. That is familylawconsulting.org. And in more direct answer to your question, um, part of the reason that you and I first met through a fellow colleague, a woman in Massachusetts, is I have been working for the last 2 years with colleagues around the world to provide litigating parents with access to the roadmap to how family law works. And that information is available to anybody who wants at another website called Diffuse. That's DEFUSE, like diffuse a bomb, diffuse anxiety, diffusedivorce.com. So, in my little niche of psychology and the law, there are several hundred people around the world who are more or less high profile, who each have their own kind of sub niche, and we all connect together at conferences and around cases. And generally, we respect one another. And I've had the great pleasure and privilege of enlisting them. They very generously supported diffusedivorce.com to create what is now 14 separate video advanced orientation programs hosted at that website. So your fellow here in New Hampshire, please don't say anything else that might identify him,
I won't.
can go to diffusedivorce.com. And you didn't say, but I'm presuming there's a child custody element going on there. Uh, I did a program myself that's hosted at diffusedivorce.com on how does a parenting plan evaluation, also known as a child custody evaluation, work. My colleague, Dr. Chloe Haas, Haaz, from the Philadelphia area, worked with me to create another program hosted at diffusedivorce.com for parents and their children to watch together to help give the child a roadmap to let the air out of the kid's balloon so that we can improve the validity, the satisfaction, the effectiveness, the efficiency of the process. We have programs up there about what is domestic violence. Are you a victim? How should you respond? Are you a perpetrator for that matter? How should you respond? What is relocation and long distance co parenting? How does the legal system work? What's a hearing? What's a trial? What's a guardian ad litem? What's a motion? What does ex parte mean? Uh, Wonderful lawyer from Texas, Elisa Reiter, did a program in which she interviews her colleagues from around the world on their experiences in the court. And I'll bore you with just one more example. A retired New York judge, Peggy Walsh. Very,
Oh, is her first name Margaret?
yes,
Oh,
yes,
yes. You just, I was like, that name's familiar. Now I know why.
that's right.
Okay.
So Peggy very generously worked with me to pull together her firsthand experience sitting on the bench as a judge adjudicating family law matters so that we could provide those experiences to people who are about to go through the process and give them some perspective on how the judge thinks about these things. I think, what do I know? I mean, I'm very biased here, but I think the information available at diffusedivorce.com specifically and the value of advanced orientation for family law generally is incalculable. We're talking about a tiny little investment up front to diminish the stress, the cost, the duration, and the negative impact of a huge, ungainly process otherwise that can and very often has an impact on the rest of people's lives.
Yeah, I have a button that I never can find when oh, I found it actually. Here it is. This is a button I had from my high school teaching days that relates to what you just said. It says, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance.
Yep.
And it is, we know how much more expensive it is to litigate and have cases dragged out in the court system. So there's so many alternatives. And the more educated you are, the more choices you have when you know that they're out there. Like some people don't even know about collaborative divorce, which they already assume would be impossible if they're dealing with a high conflict ex. When I personally know a family who had a actually both parents were kind of difficult, and they went through a system in Maryland which was funded a lot by their local courthouse or government, whatever, that eased them right through mediation, having a financial person help out a little bit, helping a therapist. It was the smoothest thing ever. I was astonished because they had professionals who knew what they were doing, and they weren't as afraid, and they weren't investing tons of money in the
Yep.
process either. So it prevented what could have blown up, not just for their families' finances, but for their daughters.
So let me respond in two ways. The first is I'll put a plug in for my colleague in Florida, Dr. Jerry or Gerald Poliokoff. I think it's Poliocoff. Jerry is the consummate collaborative law professional. He did a program with diffusedivorce.com on collaborative law, and he's just so easy to talk to and glad to educate and share. Been there, got out. Perhaps you folks want to connect with Jerry, drop my name. I'm sure he'd be glad to be on your program. He does great stuff. Uh, and here's a second note, and it is cynical, but I've earned my cynicism 40 years later. Um, Family law doesn't belong in our courts. Our courts are, in the first instance, built for criminal matters around the idea of guilt versus innocence, perpetrator versus victim, a black and white, good guy, bad guy model. Talk about square pegs and round holes. When you put family conflict into that setting, everybody approaches it as if, all right, which parent is good and which parent is bad,
Hmm.
which is seldom or never the case. Parents, like all human beings, myself included, have strengths and weaknesses. Kids need the opportunity to benefit from a combination of all of the adults who love and care for them, their strengths. And those adults may need help to remedy or diminish their weaknesses in the kid's best interests. But when you go into the court system thinking on your subject of misapprehensions or being forced to function as if I gotta win, in that circumstance, the kid always loses.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. That makes so much sense. Um, if someone is, let's say they're in the process and things are not going their way, they are going through a custody evaluation, they feel like there's been negative rulings against them, which of course they feel are unfair. Are there certain techniques that you could recommend to help them staying focused on the child's well-being? You mentioned earlier how people get so caught up in their own battle that they often forget about the kids.
Yeah. Um, that's a trick question because if you're thinking it didn't go my way,
Hmm.
then you're already not thinking about the kid.
Ooh, that's really important to note.
It may not go your way and yet be going in the kid's way. So, for example,
I was just about to say, give me an example.
yeah, go ahead, say it.
Give me an example.
Great point, Lisa. I'm glad you made it. When I have occasion to talk to litigating parents, it depends on my role, but in certain roles, I'm inclined to interrupt their questions and rants because they're often about what I'm getting and what I need and what I want. And indeed, most family law attorneys, and I have many good friends and trusted colleagues, respected peers who are family law attorneys, but many of them fuel that position because that's what the court process is about. These lawyers are engaging in what's often called zealous advocacy on behalf of the adult who's hired them. Okay, that's the way the system works, but family law isn't about getting mom what she wants or dad what he wants. By the way, we haven't said, but it could be mom and dad, or I don't care. I think maybe the question I would prefer to answer is, what should a litigant do if they believe the process isn't adequately serving their child's needs?
Hmm.
And then, having asked the question, I got to figure out if I know the answer. I, it depends, of course, on who you are and what's happening. If you don't like your lawyer and you think your lawyer is engaging in zealous advocacy on your behalf, not on the kid's behalf, fire your lawyer, get a new lawyer.
I
Um,
think what we see is a parent is aligning with the child where it's like I'm fighting for my kid. My kid and I are this is my main battle. I want to keep my
oh,
kids
oh,
safe. So if it's not going my way, then it's not going my kid's way. I don't see a lot of separation
yeah,
between like for my kid and for me.
okay.
It's we're together.
We don't have enough time to talk about all the things that you just brought up there.
Yeah.
I'm going to argue prepositions with you. I want parents to fight for their kids. I don't want them to fight with their kids. And I don't mean, hey, kid, let's have a fight. I mean,
No.
I don't want them to, what you just said, align with the child as if we're now a team. And the
Mhm.
problem is, in that simplest family, let's say mom and dad and 8-year-old Susie, it used to be perhaps that mom got emotionally refueled from dad and dad got emotionally refueled from mom. And so they were on the same page and they took care of Susie. But now the adult relationship has broken and neither parent has a source of emotional fuel. So they one or both perhaps turn to Susie. Hey, be my partner.
Yes.
And Susie, often enough, claps herself on the back and is having a little party in her head saying, yes, my mom trusts me now. And she's telling me all about her date with her new boyfriend and she's sharing the court paperwork with me. And that jerk, my dad, blah, blah, blah. And by the way, same thing happens with dads, not just about moms.
Hmm.
Um, I spend an enormous amount of time talking to professionals all over the world and testifying in courts and trying to help move cases forward in which children have become aligned with a parent. And in some of those cases, the better word is enmeshed with a parent. Let's take a minute and talk about what enmeshed means. Um, I do have a prompt. Is this going to be a video or is this going to be audio? Do we know?
Well, we want to do both.
Okay. So do not do this at home with hot liquids. I happen to have a mug full of water here.
Okay.
So I'm going to show you. Can you see?
Yep.
Okay. Can you see my hand clearly?
No, I can only see
Okay.
unless it's
I'm going to
no. I can see your shoulders.
let me, I'm going to turn off my blur so you can see this room that I'm sitting in and you'll be able to see my hand better.
Okay.
Uh,
Yes.
can you see the drip on the tip of my finger there?
Yes.
Okay. If you were close enough, or if you've got better vision than I do, you can see that there's an edge to that drip. It is a bounded, unique thing on the tip of
Yep.
my finger. Surface tension's holding it on. Okay. And if you could see into my cup here, I'm going to now shake my finger and the drip goes back in. Where is that drip now, please, Lisa?
Uh,
Show me.
back in the cup.
Show me where.
Oh, I can't see it.
What happened to it?
It blended back in with whatever else is in the cup, the
It,
water.
it lost its boundaries or its
Yeah.
cohesiveness.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to use the F word now. You'll have to censor me. Freud taught us that the infant's sense of self is oceanic. At birth, we all feel like everything is me, like the drip in the cup.
Mm-hmm.
So all of child development is this process, emerging from that ocean and becoming a bounded, separate drip. I know you're a separate drip than I am. I'm a separate drip from you. There are a lot of separate drips around us. There are some adults with very serious psychopathology who never learned that lesson, who can't tell that I'm not you and you're not me, but that's a separate story.
Mm-hmm.
That process of emergence from the cup to define yourself is gradual back and forth over the course of the first couple decades or more of life. I wrote a book about it. I'd be glad to promote. Hold on, I might have a copy here. Called, oh no, where is it? It's called Holding Tight, Letting Go. It's about the back and forth. It's about the back and forth of growing towards autonomy, separateness.
Hmm.
So, enmeshment is relative to culture and relative to the child's age, an inappropriate failure of boundaries between a parent and a child. We expect a newborn, that oceanic sense of self, to be enmeshed with mom or dad. That's healthy, that's normal. We do not expect a 20-year-old to be similarly enmeshed with mom or dad, but sometimes it happens. And
Hmm.
somewhere in between newborn and 20 or newborn and 80, gradually those steps occur. So you let the child go in a separate room by herself, you let the child go to a separate floor of the house by herself, you let the child go across the street by herself, down the street, to the store, to school, to college, whatever it is. And if it's a healthy relationship, the kid falls down and skins her knees and comes back and says, "Give me a kiss, put a band-aid on my boo-boo," and then you pat him on the head and send him off to do it again.
Hmm.
But in some unhealthy families, it doesn't happen that way. Lots
Hmm.
to say on those subjects.
I know. Each of these questions, it's like its own huge topic, and I know we only have a couple more minutes. And of course, like there's so much that we haven't gotten to talk about. But so speaking of psychology, if I'm in in the middle of this battle and I'm terrified and I have to survive it for the sake of my kid, any advice for me to be a great co-parent for this kid to lower the level of conflict?
Yes, lots. There are probably three critical variables to successful co-parenting: communication, consistency of parenting practices, and cooperation. Um, except for emergencies, be like a carpenter. I've never said it this way before. I think I like this idea. Be like a carpenter. Measure twice and cut once. Think through what you're going to say. Practice it with somebody that you trust. Have a trusted person review what you're about to send via email or in written form. I know that's what you and Chris do sometimes.
All the time.
Yeah,
Strategic communication.
yeah.
Permission slip plan. Hmm.
And if I recall, you're a fan of Bill Eddy and the Biff model.
Yes.
Absolutely. Bill's a friend. I like his work. That, but it all amounts to just a very simple thing. No, I probably said that wrong. It's not simple to do. It's simple to say. Um, it's easy enough to get legally divorced. It's really hard to get emotionally divorced.
Absolutely.
To disconnect so that when you write that note to your co-parent and former partner, you're addressing that person without all of the emotional baggage that got you to that point. I know lots of co-parents who engage in despicable kinds of communication and who are completely good about managing in the business environment or managing out there in the world, and they got the skills, but they can't bring them to bear when it comes to that person.
Yep. Yep.
Communication. Consistency of co-parenting practices depends on communication, because you got to have the wherewithal to be able to say, what time are you putting them to bed and how are you celebrating Christmas, and when are we going to introduce vegetables to his diet, and what about his asthma medication, so that the goal is so that the child doesn't suffer culture shock when he wakes up some mornings in your home and some mornings in another home, the way you and I would, Lisa, if I woke up in China 2 mornings a week and in France 2 mornings a week and alternate weekends, I forget which one.
Mm.
You don't want to have to roll over and think to yourself or spend your energy on what currency, what language, what practices here. When two homes are similar, you don't have to invest energy in that. So communication, consistency, and cooperation, which means letting go of your need to win, genuinely putting the kids' needs first.
Hmm.
It's really, truly not about, but you've got 51% of his time, or I like this one even less. You've got 51% of his waking hours. You know, I'll pull the psychologist card here. It bears zero meaning. It has no meaning to the child whether the child's with you 40% or 60% of the time.
A lot of times they don't even know.
Of course not, unless you alert them to it, and then you're doing harm.
Right.
What matters to the child is the quality of their experiences with you. Make memories together, even if you've only got 10% of the time.
Hmm.
And you know, memories doesn't mean spending money. It doesn't require Disney World tickets. My favorite way to make memories, of course, it matters how old the kid is, but go find a refrigerator box and cut windows and doors and paint it and put an old piece of carpet in the bottom and make a clubhouse with them.
Hmm.
And even if he never lets you in the clubhouse when it's done, he's got the memory of having made that clubhouse with you, and that can never be taken away.
Yeah, love it. All right, we're running out of time, Ben. How can people find your works? I know you said a couple of your websites before. Can you just repeat them again?
FamilyLawConsulting.org. And if you want to read long polysyllabic sentences about the stuff we're talking about, go to the publications page. I write kind of compulsively. And I've got a novel out there that's advertised on that page. You didn't know that, did you, Lisa?
No.
It's a novel about this work that we do called Twisted Allies. Go get a copy.
Ooh, wow. Okay.
And diffusedivorce.com, DEFUSE, divorce.com. Let the air out of that balloon, get a roadmap to all that lies ahead. Hey, Lisa, thanks to you and Chris for what you do. I think I told you when we first met, I was really hesitant because a lot of parent advocates are sort of all or nothing, moms versus dads, things like that. I've been really impressed as I've gotten to know you and Chris that you're doing really good, balanced, child-centered work. Thank you for that.
Oh, thank you so much. All right, Ben. Well, we're going to see you in person in the next couple of months, if not sooner. So thank you so much. And of course, we ran out of time, so we'll have to do this again.
I look forward to that. Best wishes.
All right, you too. Bye. Where is Chris?